Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are on episode 59, Assertive Confident Communication. I am really excited to get into this one. It's a topic I think that is not addressed enough, and we're
Mhm.
going to clear up some misnomers around it. But first, of course, I must say hello to my partner and friend, Jamie. How's it going?
Hello, happy to be here. Happy to be here. This is a dynamite episode. I am excited about it. There's a lot of good content in here, and it's a topic that I am applying and learning about constantly. So I'm excited about this one today.
Well, it's a topic everybody can use. And so, without further teasing, I'm going to just get into what we're talking about today. And this is going to be about assertive, confident communication.
Mm.
And the question obviously becomes, why would we be spending time on a recovery podcast addressing this issue? People might wonder about that. Well, for those that suffer from addiction, and we specifically address processed food addiction here, we have a history of numbing our feelings and emotions with food. So, being an effective communicator and doing so with confidence allows for everything to shift in our favor. Being out in the open versus sweeping it under the carpet, which I am an expert at sweeping, will inevitably reduce other issues and thus eliminate the propensity to eat over unwanted, uninvited emotions. So, how many problems would we solve for ourselves if we were just open and honest and upfront about how we felt about something? Then there's nothing left on the inside to fester and stir up because it's all out in the open. Duh, is what I want to say. Jamie, are you ahead of the game on this? Is this something you practice already?
I don't think I'm ahead of the game. I think I'm in the game. I'm a player in the game. I don't think I'm ahead of it at
You
all.
get points for being in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that I have learned in this latest phase of my recovery. So I would say in the last 5 to 7 years, I've been learning and applying how to be an assertive communicator. And sometimes it can start for me from anywhere from speaking how I'm feeling to someone else, using those I statements and being able to communicate my feelings and needs, all the way over to, telling someone, hey, this hurt and can we figure out a way forward? So, and there's also, I think I'm learning, there's also ways for me to solve conflict that not only bring us closer, me closer to the other person, but also um, allow me to feel like I am standing up for those inner parts of me, those inner family members, in a way that does them justice and also puts me in a place of calm and confident and compassionate care for them, so that I'm really doing a good job of being their sort of loving adult self.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up because, well, I have to give you a big compliment because you are really um, practiced and accomplished in this area of communication. Just this past week, you talked about you loving yourself, and so you're willing to bring some things forward versus sweeping it under the carpet. That something that I had said that could have been misinterpreted and potentially hurt your feelings. I also felt that it was love of me, that you
Yes,
cared enough about me that you were willing to just it's not a confrontation. It's just
that's right.
a communication back and forth. And like you mentioned just now, I think it does allow us to come closer together
Yes,
when you give me the opportunity to explain myself. So anyway, you are very effective in that area. So I appreciate that about you.
thank you.
So, when we're talking about assertive, do you automatically think of it in a negative light? Because so often when you hear that word, people are like, ooh, assertive, like it's overbearing, it's rude, it's demonstrative, it's non-flexible, unwilling to listen. Is that your first reaction, or have you evolved out of that line of thinking?
I have evolved out of that line of thinking only through education and exposure.
Mhm.
Um, and I will say one thing about what you said before. There, uh, I don't have a lot of people in my life that are in those inner circles.
Yeah.
Like we talk about the concentric sort of bullseye concentric
Mm-hmm.
circles, and where people are in those inner circles. You obviously are in one of my innermost circles,
Thank you.
and there is very few people in there. And the folks that are not in those circles, I would not spend the time or put myself vulnerably out there to them. Like the person we were just talking about before we filmed.
Mm.
I would never even bother trying to explain this hurt and how can we figure this out because you're very valuable. I would get made fun of, laughed at, dismissed, or ignored. So I would never make myself vulnerable to that person because essentially that is not a safe dynamic. But with you and I, it's a safe dynamic.
I I'm going to add on to that. That's I was going to bring up that point about you have to know your audience.
That's right.
And I think that's part of maturation is knowing your audience, knowing who's safe, and that it's there's an open door to have communication. Because sometimes, honestly, this is just not an option to have
That's right.
a, a high level dialogue with somebody. So anyway, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, but I don't think that that it's negative. Once I understood that there's levels, and we're going to talk about those, we're going to talk about, aggressive communication versus assertive communication. There's a very big difference. And aggressive communication is, I think, can be overbearing. It can be rude. It can be
Yes.
inflexible. It can be unwilling. And it could be, even demeaning.
Oh
But
yeah.
assertive communication truly comes from a place of love and self-regard.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to sidestep here. You brought that up about aggressive approaches. Sometimes I think people that are aggressive, it's
Mm,
really fear-based because their
right.
dukes are up, and if you talk back, I'm going to give you some of this because really they're actually very sensitive and
Yes.
don't want to deal with it. So they're going to grit their teeth, bare their teeth, and
Mhm.
growl at you just so don't mess with me because I'm too tender. I don't want to have to deal with it. Anyway,
You're right.
that's a sidestep. So let's talk for a minute about what an assertive personality really is. It is someone who is confident and self-assured. They are comfortable taking initiative and communicating their needs and opinions openly. They are able to express their thoughts and beliefs honestly and reasonably while respecting the thoughts and wishes of others at the same time. So
Mhm.
assertiveness is a social skill that relies heavily on effective communication while simultaneously respecting the thoughts and wishes of others. People who are assertive clearly and respectfully communicate their wants, needs, positions, and boundaries to others. I think that's huge that they are trying to be very respectful in the communication. So there's no question where they stand there, no matter what the topic. And by the way, this does describe Jamie to a T. She's very effective, confident communicator. So have you
Thank you.
always been like that? I mean, you've kind of hinted at that it was a process for you
Yes.
a little bit. So you had to go to the school of hard knocks of
Oh,
assertive
yes.
communication. Get it?
Yes. Yes. Well, and I want to just take a step back because you brought up this whole idea of aggressive versus
Yeah.
assertive. And
Hmm.
you asked about the experience of folks who, were not encouraged to be assertive. And is that something that, is being assertive better received now than it used to be? No, I think it really depends on who's being assertive. And I think this is true. I think this is a shift in society over the last
Yes,
60 to 70 years, right? Women, if they
absolutely.
were assertive, were labeled a negative word.
Oh, yeah. Totally. And we can talk about this now. We were going to talk about it later, but when I grew up, believe me, women were not encouraged. And there's a 13 year, there's over a decade between us.
Mm,
And I don't know if that's enough of a change that I'm sure it was much better for you, but I don't ever remember when I was growing up in the 60s that women were encouraged to even have an opinion.
right.
So I know that was the nuance that I grew up in
Mhm,
and how it was looked on in society. So
mhm. Yeah,
anyway, do
yeah.
you have anything more to say about your semesters worth of education. Maybe
Yeah.
it took 2 semesters of
Yes.
developing that skill.
Yeah, it was a skill, and I will tell you, you said it well, hard, school of hard knocks, but here's what my hard knocks were. My hard knocks were because I didn't have self-confidence.
Mhm.
Um, or maybe the self-esteem that comes from doing the things that I want to do consistently over time.
Yeah.
So I learned, and it was taught to me, and I learned how to be passive aggressive instead, either not saying what I wanted to say, and
Mm.
and then just taking out, behaviors, or sort of acting like everything was fine and it really wasn't.
Mhm.
Or I would, because I wouldn't feel comfortable being assertive, and I knew I couldn't be aggressive, I would try to manipulate from behind the scenes. I would go to
Ooh.
this person and plant a little seed in their ear, and then go to this person and plant another seed in their ear, and then do this, and then, oh, did you see that? And oh, but all I was doing was controlling. And
Really, you were just getting your 10,000 steps in a day.
yeah, no way. Yeah, 10,000 is no way. And I got called on it by
Mm. Ouch.
mostly by men, actually, and not in a dating scenario, but men in the family. And I really appreciated that, actually. It was hard at first, and I was like, "Hey, wait a second," because I was ticked that they saw through it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "Oh, like I can just say to them, I'd like you to do this and that, or I'd like to be here for that, and can we make this work?" And instead of just being assertive, I was really causing more trouble, and
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah. Everyone.
Yeah,
Abs
absolutely. And I lost esteem in my, social circle or family or whatever, whoever I was dealing with, because people knew that I wasn't really being assertive and saying what I needed to say.
Mhm.
So again, I was perpetuating some of these beliefs that they had and stories they had about me, and I wasn't really even trying to.
Right. So, since we've decided this is a skill you can develop, let's break this down into smaller pieces. Our definition starts out labeling an
Mhm.
assertive personality as someone who is confident and self-assured. So then the question becomes, how do you gain confidence? Is it something you work on or does it just come naturally?
Good question. I think it can be both. I think it can be innate, and I think it can be developed. I know it can be developed. It's something that I experienced. Confidence truly comes from past experiences of achieving and not relying on external sources for validation. So it's essentially doing what we say what we will do. When we can observe ourselves having the integrity of doing what we said we will do, that
Mhm.
is absolutely how we build confidence. And we don't necessarily wait for other people to tell us or to give us. We just do it, and we develop the skill of self-validation instead of external validation. All of this is combined with education in, an area of expertise that interests us. For me, absolutely my weight loss journey. At the
Yeah.
time, I thought it was about weight loss, but it was my recovery journey. That it started out again, and where I thought it was weight loss related, and that gave me a lot of self-esteem that I did what I said I was going to do,
Right.
and regained my health. And then when I struggled with trying to moderate processed foods still, because I was told I could moderate processed foods, I lost some of that esteem, and I struggled. And I struggled hard. And that struggle led to the end of a marriage, and led to, lots of rifts with in my in my personal and professional life. And it led to me just not showing up for me. And until the bottom truly came. And
Mhm.
I realized, okay, I don't have any, I have not stood up to myself for myself
Yes.
in too long. And now I understand that this is an addiction, and I can actually get into recovery. And I was in recovery for I was in recovery for relationships. I was in recovery for food addiction. And I was in, I even went to, even though I do not struggle and never struggled with alcohol, I started going to meetings, recovery meetings for alcoholics, because I had so much in common with the way they thought and the way they lived.
Mhm. Yeah. So you're right on. I definitely think developing a skill set is where my confidence comes from as well. It doesn't come naturally until I feel assured in what I'm doing. So for me, it's been through Educating myself combined with repeated experience. I might even add failing has helped boost my confidence because I learned so much and I'm better prepared for the next time. It's kind of what you were saying too. You failed at that trying to manipulate the situation and you were willing to learn from that experience. You weren't willing to place blame, you didn't get mad. You just said, "Okay, universe, this is a great
Mhm.
growth opportunity for me." Brilliant. So maybe the word I'm looking for in all of this is just practice. It's that practice makes perfect. I think that's the best way to confidence.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that. Practice also reduces anxiety.
True.
Anxiety can take hold when people are plagued by self-doubt, so putting themselves in situations they fear can assure people that nothing bad will truly happen.
Hmm.
Then each activity gets easier with practice, and just as we said, also setting and meeting goals can enable the belief that we are competent and capable. And I'll just add this, something that's true for me. Practice, I had a lot of anxiety about riding my bike on the roads in New Jersey. And I also know that the only way to get over anxiety is just to do something. So I just got out there and started riding. And sure enough, the more I did it, the more I enjoyed
Yeah.
doing it, and the less anxiety I had about it. And then I had a situation over this, probably I guess in the fall, where I was almost hit by a car, and very scary. And I learned a lot. I immediately got myself a mirror, and I figured out how to be very, very careful. But I got myself right back out there. I did not let myself put the bike in the basement and be done with it until I felt like it again. I just got myself the next day right back on that bike with my mirror, and I got right into traffic again. And I learned how to keep myself safe the best I could. And because I thought, if I let this anxiety get me, I'm going to lose my confidence.
Right. Right. So really, it sounds like confidence comes from just putting yourself out there and being willing to let the chips fall where they may. That takes courage. You could have easily, it would have been way easy at first glance to
Yeah.
put that bike away and never ride the bike again at first glance. So, but the payoffs are so big when you don't do that and you accomplish more and you overcome these fears. And then all of this ties right back into being assertive. It's just willing to put yourself out there and regardless of the consequences, you're
Mhm.
being true to your values, true to yourself.
Yeah, this leads into our next point of being assertive in communication. It's when people are comfortable taking initiative and communicating their leads and opinions openly. So it goes back to that biblical principle or spiritual principle, and it's in all religious practices, by the way. It's not just Christian, but we hear it again and again. The things that we leave in the dark, the secrets that we don't talk about, the conversations we don't have with in a loving, safe, respectful relationship, those those secrets, those dark things fester and grow. They
Mhm.
don't get better, they don't go away. So it's so important to bring things out into the open so they can heal and they can be talked about and they can get light on them so the light can heal them. Paige, why do you think it's so hard for some just to say what their needs and opinions are?
Um, I'm going to answer that, but I was thinking about a wound
Hmm.
and having it open to air versus like buried deep.
Hmm.
It's going to heal a lot faster, a lot better if it's given the physical things that it needs to heal. But
Yes.
yes, we talked about this a little bit, but looking at my growing up, it just was not encouraged, especially for women, or I should say only for women and children, of course, to be outspoken about needs or strong opinions. It might have been interpreted as being rude or overbearing, but now I understand that being upfront with where you are is actually a kinder approach. If you really want to connect with someone on a deeper level, and this is what you and I were talking about in the beginning of this podcast, that you cared enough about me
Mhm.
to assert your concern, and it allowed me an opportunity to clarify something. So it allowed us to connect on a deeper level. So I think when you really care about somebody, it's definitely worth the effort. And you also it allows that person to know who you really are. So not to mention, you can always share who you are and what you want in the most kind way.
Yeah.
And another compliment about Jamie is anytime we have to discuss something, she is uber kind. I mean, so it keeps the other person off the defense because I know the intentions by the tone and the timbre when someone approaches you. So
Thank you. I'm
are
glad to
you?
hear you say that. I will ask you to put that in a text to my husband. Please. Yeah, before the day is out would be great. Thanks.
Now it's good. Now it's good for me.
That's good.
Now it's
He
good.
doesn't. I could come to him with like kid gloves and completely open and loving, and he'll be like rah about if it's a certain topic that he does not want to talk about.
Mhm.
He's getting better. He's getting better. But
He'll need to
and
listen to this podcast.
yes, oh no, we will. Sweetheart, when you're listening to this with me in the car that I just happened to play because we just came out, I'm remembering. I just want you to know, months ago when we recorded this episode, honey, I remembered it. So now I'm playing it for you intentionally.
Let me know how that works out.
Yeah, I will. So where I am on this is very similar. I was not encouraged as a young
Mhm.
woman to speak up. Passive aggression, guilt trips, codependency were all behaviors in my family of origin, especially the women in my family of origin. So that is there are some women in my family of origin that are assertive communicators, a couple that I have in mind, and it is awesome to watch them in action. It really is. It's almost funny in
It's
a
a
good way.
fine art. It's a fine
Yeah.
art. You think you have to really balance it without crossing over. It's a beautiful spot if you
It's
can pull it
endearing.
off.
It's endearing to watch. Now I have my cousin. I've talked about her before on this podcast. She's my eldest cousin and on my mom's side, and she very, very, very gifted attorney. And obviously they have a gift for that anyway.
Mhm.
And it's of course developed in them and honed in all of their different legal processes. But man, to see her with family and just assertively communicate is awesome. Um, and she's taught me a lot about how to speak up for my needs and speak up for
Mhm.
what I want or don't want, and also how to push back when family's trying to manipulate and control.
Right.
She's taught me a lot about that.
Yeah, and as we've talked about a little bit, is we really want uh who we're talking to share their needs, wants, and opinions as well. That's part of the assertive communication. It's not just you getting your opinions out. In that process, you also reciprocate what the receiver is feeling as well. And I have learned that part of being an assertive communicator is being willing to listen to the other side without judgment. That's the prepositional phrase that has to be in that sentence. You have to be willing to listen what they're saying,
Yeah.
really listen and detaching from the outcome. Our podcast that just came out today was on ACT
Yeah.
therapy, diffusion, and DEFUSSI. So separating what the message is or your feelings from reality. So there's some space in there to really look at things more honestly without emotion. So detaching from the outcome is huge. In order to stay in my integrity, I have to be okay with what the other side is saying and allow them their feelings, even if I don't like it. I've
Yeah.
had to practice with this as my children have become adults. And for some weird reason, they all of a sudden have their own opinions versus what they were taught to do growing up. So
Yeah.
rude. So learning to disagree without being disagreeable
Yep.
is a very fine art as
Yep.
well.
Yep. Paige, you're actually very good at that. When Paige and I we rarely disagree on things like in the final outcome. Like we usually can find validity, almost always we can find validity in what the other person is thinking, even
Sure.
if we have an opposite stance about it. We can say,
Right.
okay, I get it. I get how you can see that.
Mhm.
But there was one thing, I don't remember what it was now, but it was one thing that Paige said, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree here. And I just remember thinking like, yeah, that's pretty skilled. Like, you're right. We're going to agree to disagree. She remembered it one way, whatever it was. She remembered it one way. I remembered it a different way. And sometimes that is the best that you can do. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We had a situation last week, Paige and I, with someone we work with, and it was very clear that this person had a different perspective than we did. And I thought about that phrase, like, this is a perfect time to levy that phrase, like, we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's kindness. It's letting them off the hook. It's also giving you the ability to let it go. It's just a win-win.
Yeah.
And I think that some, don't you think that sometimes it's okay to stop and say, I just need to put a pause in the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Big head
Because
nods. You can't see this, but I'm really not nodding my head big.
yes, the deal is, if we get activated, it's critical for us. Activated means that we're feeling very, in our body somewhere, very tense, very agitated. I call it the volcano will erupt in my sternum, where I'll just feel, all kinds of blood rushing and endorphins rushing, and that is my cue now. Instead of that used to be my cue to just open my mouth and let it out. And now it's my cue to just pause and walk away.
Yeah.
And then go do some deep dive, because if I've got a flush going on like that in my body, it's deep. It's something way, way back from childhood that needs to be readdressed and reparented. It has very little to do with the other person.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me one time. It's from your past if all these emotions come up
Yes.
and you can't regulate yourself. The fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, that sympathetic and parasympathetic reaction, and you
Mhm.
can't settle yourself down and process it, versus it's a present thing if you're able to regulate your emotions and process
Exactly.
what's happening. So yeah, good
Exactly.
point. Great point. So
And
I agree completely with all of that. And sometimes I find it helpful when things are getting tense and communication seems to be fading, is to just stop and start asking questions, which I think Jamie and I are very good at. Okay, we're trying to work this out. Let's just start throwing questions at it, and that will flush out answers. So looking
yes,
for clarification, it may just be a communication error that can be easily resolved by obtaining more information. I also think when you're asking sincere questions, it shows the other person that you really do care, which also takes people off the defense. Plus, asking questions saves time and hurt feelings, I think, as well.
great point. I've also found in communication that if I keep to my I statements versus you statements, that keeps people off the defensive. The minute we start asking, or saying, you did this, or you made me feel, people feel attacked and automatically stop listening and start
Mhm.
their rebuttal.
Mhm.
So this is something that I did not learn, because this was the you statements were currency growing up. They were what was told to me, what was modeled for me. They were used as weapons all over the family dynamics, all over the place. It was, there's these things wrong with you. Why do you do this? What's wrong with you? How are you going to make me feel this? Well, you did this, so I feel that. I mean, it was constant. So I did not understand, no joke, until about 3 years ago, did not understand that you statements were like the key to people becoming defensive. They were the key that unlocks the tiger in the cage almost every time. But growing up in a family where everyone slung around the you statements, I just thought, well, like, that's what everyone communicates with. Why does this bother you so much? Well, I had repressed, at that time, 40 plus years of feeling labeled and pinched and under a finger. And I just thought it was normal. So that was, again, another exposure. Was genuinely confused when people would respond with the use. It had contributed to the end of my first marriage, I'm sure. And it was absolutely starting to impact my new marriage, because I was using the you statements, and
Mm.
I didn't understand what I was doing.
Mm.
So another key to learn, that I think really helps all of us, is learning when to be silent and just listening. when to sort of open our ears and shut our mouths.
Mhm.
So much power in quietly absorbing what is being said. This may sound counterintuitive, but it's actually a strong form of being an assertive communicator. And that's something that I've had to learn in my, because I'm a talker. I work things out by talking it out. I'm not a writer, I'm a talker. So I had to learn to shut my mouth and open my ears. Do you agree with this?
Okay, so I have to laugh because when you were talking about how 3 years ago you really learned that skill, I thought, man, I came to be friends with her at just the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's worked out all the kinks. This
Yeah.
is awesome. I've got a kink-free friend.
That's what my husband says. He's like, you got Doug 2.0. You got husband 2.0.
That's nice. So yes, I do agree with what you said about that is so big to stop and listen. Sometimes I call it being where your feet are, just fully present in the situation, sharing and then allowing the other person to talk. And if you really want to know what the other person has to say, you have got to listen. And when I say listen, it's not forming your rebuttal. It's actually dialing into what they're saying. You're fully present. And that can take practice, not to zone out and think about how does that, whatever they're saying, affect me? And they're wrong about that. And I'm going to say this, but it's listening without that emotion. And I think that assertive communication is really built on respect for yourself as well as equally to that person that you are interacting with.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Assertiveness also means standing up for your point of view while at the same time respecting the rights and beliefs of others. So it's the whole idea of the abundance, right? I can feel this way and I can hold space and respect for you feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
This oftentimes gets confused with the word aggressive, right? Assertive gets confused with the word aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Aggressive, the word aggressive, aggressiveness has nothing to do with assertiveness because there is no respect present when you're aggressive. It's all about your fear, your needs, your scarcity, your angst, your anxiety. It
Mm-hmm.
has nothing to do with the other person. And people who are aggressive come across as bullies who ignore others' needs, feelings, and opinions, which unfortunately I've got much experience with. You may even appear self-righteous or superior. I would say, yes, that's also true. Very aggressive people embarrass, intimidate, and scare others and may even be physically threatening.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You may think that being aggressive gets you what you want. However, it definitely comes at a cost.
Yep.
Aggression weakens trust and mutual respect. Absolutely. And others may come to resent you, leading them to avoid or oppose you. Yep.
Isn't that so funny? It's you think you're just getting ahead because you're just going to bully them into whatever. And really, you are putting yourself further and further and further
Mhm.
behind. It's such a backward thinking position. And I'm so glad that you brought all of this up because I think it's where some people get confused. And that makes me feel better by clarifying the difference between assertive and aggression. And
Yes,
just as bad as aggressive can be, the also the guy that's too passive causes problems as well. Those who
absolutely.
can't say no, which only breeds resentment, don't be a doormat. It will turn on you and come out sideways at the worst time every time. You also have to learn that the word no is a complete sentence and we must reinforce our boundaries if we want them respected. You may have to repeat yourself, but you can do it kindly and it may be awkward at first. But what is more awkward is the eventual outcome of you not saying what your needs are up front, then having to go back later and clean up a mess because you were too weak to initially say no.
Mhm.
So I know a girl who got married to her high school boyfriend because she was too weak and afraid to break up. She was afraid of being alone, didn't want to face the conflict. So she just went along with the marriage, ended up in several affairs, had a few kids. So we're 20 years down the road, and all of a sudden she's developing a backbone and deciding to speak up because she was just so miserable that the cost benefit was no longer weighing out. But the problem is it was just a disaster. So many people's lives were affected by it when she decided to stand up for herself and end the marriage. It just was mass destruction for so many people. So
Mm.
messy. causes so much hurt in the long run. And I'm thinking, would that not have been easier to break up in high school?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's probably a lot of marriages that are like that. Because
Totally.
one or both parties didn't speak up or was in fear and thought, well, this is just this person will have me, so I'll take them.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't want to be alone.
Yep.
So I'll do anything.
Yep. Yeah. So one final note when it comes to assertive communication, it's important to know your values. Know what your needs are, but don't expect others to match your needs and wants. That is true. That expect word, right? That always leads to disappointment. And
Mhm,
again, like anything, communication is a skill set, as we've mentioned. It's a practice.
mhm.
Practice sharing what you feel, and in time, it will become second nature to you because of all the rewards that flow from honest communication. And also, I'll add to this, be careful who you're sharing your heart with.
That's right.
This discernment that Paige and I have talked about, our growth in our adult lives, and for me in my recovery, and Paige, you've grown even before you entered a formal recovery group. Um, this is the most important part of discernment, is not only how to discern what we need to say and how we need to say it, but who we're saying it to. Be
Right.
very careful about who you're opening your heart to, because when you're vulnerable and assertive, if you are dealing with someone who is aggressive, who is dysfunctional, who is not able to receive what you're putting out there, you can get hurt. And it's important for you, okay, the first time it happens,
Mm-hmm.
you just remember that this is not someone that I can open up to like this. And they move outside of that, of a circle that's closer to your innermost heart. They
That's right.
move out.
You are never going to get your needs met by that person.
No, no. And don't think by going back and trying to again and again and again with an unsafe person.
Bang
It,
out, bang
yeah,
out, bang out.
exactly. Oh, and I have more bruises on my head than I care to admit from banging my head on proverbial rocks or walls. So it's not worth it.
Mhm.
Um, Listener questions. First question, I get so nervous about speaking up for myself. I worry that it will come across as rude. Do you know what I mean? Yes, I know what you mean. And we've spent a lot of time on this topic. So go back and have a listen. Assertiveness is not being rude. Assertiveness actually is a form of love. It's knowing yourself. It can be done in a very kind way, as we've talked about. It's being a person who knows what they want and isn't afraid to communicate it with people that they know are, or they're willing to find out are safe, receptive, respectful. And you can practice phrasing statements so they're palatable for the receiver and clear in getting what you want across, right? Play with tone, play with your timbre, your facial expressions, your body language. Those can all be, tools in your tool belt for communicating effectively.
I agree completely. So, is being assertive always the right answer, no matter the circumstances? Actually, no. There's no one method that works perfectly all the time. It is definitely the preferred method, but sometimes you are dealing with someone who simply cannot absorb what you wish to convey. We kind of talked about that a little bit. And oftentimes their thick-headedness is about reducing their own vulnerability, shame, guilt, or fear as you witness their defensive reaction. So in my experience, this often shows up in generational norms of communication styles. Some that are older and not familiar with this level of open communication may be very uncomfortable, and all they're just trying to shut it down. Whatever their reaction is, what they're saying is, I need to shut this down as soon as possible. I don't want to hear anymore. I don't want to talk about it. And I'm going to have a childlike tantrum in order to make you stop talking to me. So
That's right. Yes. Yes. You must know some people I know. Is it okay to challenge others' ideas? This is the third viewer question. Is it okay to challenge others' ideas? Would that be an example of being assertive? Yes, it's an example of being assertive, and it is okay. As again, keeping in mind who you're talking to, right? You want to have this sort of building of mutual respect, building of mutual understanding and connection. We talked about it can be done with kindness and respect, and make it about you in the sense of you asking questions to get clarification, you asking questions, to put yourself in their shoes, to utilize empathy. It essentially clarity is kindness. That's a phrase that I love. I think it's such a beautiful and true phrase. Clarity is kindness. So when you're trying to get clear from someone or clarity from someone about what they said or what they need, it's an act of kindness. It's an act of love. I want to make sure I'm really hearing you.
Yes, good point.
And it makes it about you wanting to show up for them in the best way possible. It would be wrong to say something like, what you're saying makes no sense, right? So again, that's sort of discounting them, has that you statement in there. And when you ask questions with an open mind or a growth mindset, you might actually end up appreciating another point of view. It's also very humbling. And it's just good practice.
Yeah, you've done that for me, that you've just kept working with me till I eventually was able to see a new point of view, which helped me grow too.
Mm,
So I love that
vice
point.
versa.
So
Vice versa.
last listener question. I want to be more assertive, but I think I'm just shy. So I don't think it's going to work out for me. Or is it something I can develop? So I understand this may be out of your comfort zone. I do not ever discount that. It's not always comfortable, even when you're skilled at it. Nobody wants to have to confront somebody, even in a kind way. It doesn't feel great, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way with a little bit of practice. Plus, it sounds like it is something you desire, which also helps a lot. If you desire this, it's going to help you grow quickly into that skill. So start with knowing what your own needs, wants, and feelings are. That is tremendously helpful. Choose your words carefully. You might even practice in the mirror and speak with confidence. I have always found that if you speak with confidence, others will believe you. So practice saying no, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's not being rude. It's expressing your boundaries in a clear way so everyone can understand where you are. And lastly, practice active listening and use your body language in your communication. This may take some time. Don't give up. And you can even start with the dog. And because
Ah,
it is true that
yep,
the dog does know, will respond to your communication. And then we can build up from the dog and go
that's right.
to the cat.
Very true. That's very true. It's very true. Dogs, and then moving up to small children, right? To really,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, being
Yeah,
sort of with a
totally.
small child, you get a different
Mhm.
response than if you're aggressive with them, or God forbid, or that they perceive it as that. And also asking questions of a small child helps them explain what they're thinking and feeling, and getting in touch with
Right.
that. Uh, I wish my dog could respond to some of the questions I've asked him, but he does respond when I'm more assertive and less aggressive.
Oh, they know, right?
Well, yes, and I ground my energy, like I have this like energy rod that I imagine going from myself into the whatever ground I'm standing on when I use my assertive communication with them, and
Mhm.
every time they're right there, or they do what I'm asking them to do.
That's
So
great.
yeah, I don't think that would have worked if I was a mom, but who knows? Maybe I'll get a chance to figure that out as a grandma.
Yeah.
Uh, Great episode, Paige. Thank you.
Loved it. I loved it. I hope you guys learned something from this. And if you did, and if you have comments or feedback, we would love to hear from you. And until then, if you want to find out more about real food recovery and our online food addiction community, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And we hope to see you there. Thanks, guys.
Take care.